So if you have any question, just ping me. I would love to answer them if I have an answer. Otherwise, I will post it to somebody who is able to answer them. Okay, so very good morning, India, and welcome to this presentation. And thanks to Adobe for sponsoring this session. And I understand that it has been a hectic week for most of you. Some of you might have even late night dinners yesterday as on a business dinner, or somebody might have been working on different assignments. And I have worked for about 8 years in India, so I understand very well how hectic can a week be. So kudos and thank you very much for joining this session. I'm based in Toronto, and if you can see the picture, the skyline is of Toronto. And if you look at the extreme left of the picture, you will see some of the cranes. And if you go move about 3 kilometers north of those cranes, that's where I'm located right now in my apartment on a 15th floor. And in fact, I can see the iconic Toronto Tower, which is known as CN Tower. CN Tower was uh, once the tallest building in the world and was for 19 years until Burj Khalifa came up. So I thought it would be good to have this background. My name is Gurpreet. I blog on technical writing at technicalwritingtoolbox.com. So today we are going to talk about APIs and APIs documentation. And I understand by talking to a lot of new and experienced technical writers that API documentation is something which most people are interested, but most of them think that it's very difficult. You need to have a programming background to understand API documentation. Um, some are the myths, some are valid questions. So I will try to respond to most of the questions and to demystify the API documentation. The intended audience is of course you guys, and I've created this as a beginner level. But if some of you are interested, we can have a more detailed session about API documentation. So this is the rough agenda I have prepared today, but I want to have an interactive session. So if you can keep pinging your questions, I can definitely incorporate them in the session itself. So we will be talking about APIs. What exactly is an API? And I will go into more details about some examples of API so that you feel more comfortable. Just like when you start documenting a new product, you first learn how to use it. So if you are going to document APIs, you should able to use them or execute them at the simplest level. So we will be doing a small live demo exercise, in which we will play with a small API. That would be very, very interesting. I have conducted a similar session, and the response was very great with the live example. We'll talk about some of the API types. Though there is no generalized types of API documentation, nobody has classified APIs into A, B, C types. But still, based on their responses, based on how they connect to the different service providers, what kind of data they pass, what kind of language they work with, we can distinguish them into broadly few categories. We will talk about that. We'll talk about the structure of an API document. We'll talk about some of the interesting tools which automatically generate API documentation, which means less work for you guys for sure. A writer is always required, but you can definitely automate some of your manual copy paste kind of tasks. And we will see some good examples of API documentation. So I will just taking the sessions as well so that everything is okay. Okay, so if everybody can hear me, just say yes on the chat window so that I have some confidence, because I'm not getting any feedback, so I'm not sure if anybody is hearing me or not. Okay, good, good. So good, good, great to see so many enthusiastic people in the morning. Yay! All of you had some good coffee. So let's start with APIs. So what's an API? So API stands for Application Programming Interface. Sounds very complicated, but it's not. Trust me, it's not. After the session, we will take a poll of what you thought before and what you thought after the session about APIs. But in short form, it's API. It's difficult to write application programming interface every time, 100 times a day. So API is sweet and short. What it is, it's difficult to define an API, but in simplistic term, it's a set of programming instructions and standards for accessing a software functionality. Now, what we exactly mean by that? I'm sure most of us, I would say all of us, use software. For example, you use Word, you use PowerPoint, you use RoboHelp, FrameMaker, Confluence, name a tool. You use it all. And how you use it is using an interface. So basically, you are a human and you are interacting with the software. So you open a software, you click the file, new, you type in the commands, you press Control S to save it. So you are interfacing, you are making a connection with the software using the graphics. They are buttons, they are push buttons, they are tabs, they are checkboxes, they are dialog boxes. So they are an interface for the software to connect with you. You command the software to get connected to perform an action by clicking or pressing or by giving some indication. We call it GUI, right? Graphic User Interface. Now notice the term interface. The application programming interface is another interface, just like graphic user interface. The only difference is instead of the graphic user, it's application programming. So it's a method with which one software or a hardware or a machine can communicate with another software or machine. So in the first example of graphic user interface, you are connecting with the software. In the second example, the application programming interface, a machine or a software is connected with another software. So think of API is um, as a connection, as a bridge between two softwares or two machines or a machine or a software. It is a bridge, it's a communication, it's just an interface, nothing fancy. What API can do? They can do a lot of things, but you can broadly classify them into three different categories. They can request information, they can send information, and they can update information. These are three primary tasks any API does. The method might be different, the language might be different, the connection might be different, but they do three things. They request the information, they send the information, and they update the information. So I will take some real world examples in which we can understand more about APIs. Um, so let's start with Twitter. So most of us use Twitter and we tweet a lot. And if you are on Twitter, you can follow me at Gurpreet writes at at Twitter. So the most common way we tweet, actually I tweet, is by logging into my Twitter account in a browser and typing in the small box located at the lower top and pressing the tweet button. So this is the graphic user interface. I'm working with the Twitter GUI, which is one way to send the tweets. Let's say I want to tweet 10 times in a second for 24 hours. It's probably impossible to do that with GUI. You can't press the tweet button 10 times or 60 times every minute continuously for 24 hours. But with an API, you can do that. So look at the bottom URL. So the HTTPS is a protocol, the hypertext markup language protocol, and look at the word api.twitter.com/1.1. It is a main URL for Twitter to execute Twitter APIs. 1.1 stands for the version number of the API. 1.0 would be older, 1.1 is newer, and so on. And look at the last two words in the same line after 1.1, it's statuses slash update dot JSON. This is an API which performs the same task that the above GUI is trying to do. It's going to update and status. Now you cannot update a status of anybody. You have to first authenticate. For example, when you are logging into your Twitter account, you're authenticating yourself. So when you are using an API, you first authenticate, and what you receive back is a software token, which is like a long password. Using that software token, you can send more commands to Twitter. So the bottom command is exactly similar to the above GUI command, but the fact is that we can do it programmatically. So we can, any other application can use that as well. For example, a lot of people when they blog on WordPress or when they write on LinkedIn, they tweet automatically by simply pressing a checkbox. Now Twitter is a different company than LinkedIn, than WordPress, but they all talk to each other using APIs which are open. So it's a way to connect between connection between Twitter and LinkedIn and WordPress and any other application outside. They can use the same syntax. They can have an interface. They can pass the authentication, and then they can do anything they want. Another very good example graphic is the Google Maps. Uh, it's very important to use Google Maps when you are in North America. In India, you can ask directions to anybody on the road, but if you're driving in North America, you have to have Google Maps. When I came to Canada, I knew nothing about Toronto, how to navigate, how to go to university, how to go to a shopping plaza, to a mall. Google Maps provides very good directions, and it's you can see the entire route. Uh, so we will talk about two things now in Google Maps. In fact, we will do a live exercise to work with the Google Maps API, which is very interesting, which will give you a lot of confidence about how to work with APIs. So this is a graphic user interface for Google Maps, and uh, let's try out a live example. So what I'm trying to do is open google.com. So you have a graphic user interface of Google Maps in which you can type anything. Let's say I want to see my hometown, New Delhi, and specifically I want to see India Gate. So what I would do, I will type India Gate, New Delhi, and select. So it will show me the map of India Gate. I can zoom in, I can zoom out, I can select different kind of maps. This is what we do normally, right, in Google Maps using the graphic user interface. But Google, just like Twitter, provides an API from which you can do the same thing, and it's very, very interesting. So what I have done, I have created a small sample, and I will be sending the sample to everybody so that they can play. So the website you are seeing is called W3 Schools. It's a very interesting website if you are interested in programming, if you are interested in APIs. It's a website in which on the left side you can enter code, and on the right side it will actually display the results. So it's you become a developer in kind, and you can test your documentation. If you are creating something in RoboHelp and the syntax is not correct, you can paste the code here on the left side. You can update different settings on the code, and it will show the result immediately. So what I have done in this API is the same thing in which we have done through the graphic user interface. But instead of the graphic user interface, I am working with Google APIs. So there are two things as we discussed earlier. The first one is the authentication, because Google wants to authenticate who you are. So what I have done is that I have added a token. So the highlighted part you see on the screen is a token. So what I'm saying is that the key is this. So now Google provides this key freely to everybody. You can create your own account in Google Console API, and they will give you a specific key which is your ID Google. So this key is public. It's created by W3 Schools, so I'm using it, but you can create your own key as well. It's a method of authentication. Now, the latitude and longitude. So basically, it defines few objects. So I'm just talking about the API. So one API is called latlang. So it's the URL is google.maps.latlang, which shows you a map of anywhere on Earth if you provide the right latitude and longitude. So right now I have added the latitude and longitude of New Delhi. So it's showing me New Delhi. But let's say I want to see Toronto. So I will just copy. So these are commented portions, so they are not running, but I can just copy the value for the latitude of Toronto and the longitude of Toronto. Submit. Oops, I guess it's minus. Okay, my bad. It's minus instead of plus. So the map becomes Toronto. So this is Toronto, and if I zoom out, now there are two ways to zoom out. You can use the graphic user interface, or you can change the value of zoom. So zoom is an API. You are changing the value of an API. Let's say I want to zoom out and make it 8 instead of 10 and press the submit button. I zoomed out. What if I want to go a bit smaller? Zoom out to 7. So this is Toronto and this is New York. So Toronto is on the northwest shore of Lake Ontario. So this is a big lake which spans several hundred kilometers. It's so big that on one side we have Canada and on the other side we have US. So if you swim from Toronto, you can directly reach New York if you can swim about 500 kilometers. So it's so as you can see, by manipulating the parameters of the API, you are doing what you were supposed to do in the Google Maps, and you have more control to do that. For example, let's say currently it shows me a terrain map which shows which are where are the mountains, where are the lakes, and so on. Let's say I want to see the actual satellite video. So if you look at the map type API, this is another API from Google which says map type id.google.maps, which can have four values: road map, satellite, hybrid, or terrain. Right now we have selected terrain, but let's say I want to say hybrid, so I will just type hybrid instead of terrain and submit it. Oops, this is typo. The maps become hybrid. Let's say I want to zoom in, change it to 8, it becomes zoomed in. And let's say I this window is like very small, I want to make it little bit wider. So here are my another setting. I'm setting the Google map width and height. Let's say I make the width to 800 pixels instead of 700 pixels and then submit it. The window becomes wider. I can do anything with the APIs. So APIs are miraculous. You can define different values and you can achieve almost anything you can do, and probably much more than what you will do in the graphic user interface. So now you are a user of an API rather than a documenter. So similar to what Google Maps provides, if you're working with a product which has an API, you can play with the API using this kind of setup. It's very easy to create. Even if your organization doesn't API parameters. And some parameters are very easy to understand. And for example, the map type ID, it can have four values, nothing else. If I type anything else, it will not create the right code. So it can have only one of the four values. So it can get only values. While the lat lang, it can have any value of the world. Probably there's no limit. You can create a window that you want, and you can disable, enable controls, and you can do anything you want with the Google API. So let's go back to the API session. So now I'm hope that some of the fear about APIs would be gone, because APIs are nothing complicated. You can use APIs very well to your use. The only thing you need is first the authentication, the execution call, and the parameters of the API, which is probably what we do when we are working with any command line or command prompt. Now, APIs came into existence pretty soon. I would say a couple of years back. So there's no organization that standardized the types of APIs, but still, based on their usage, we can divide them into three broad categories. So imagine all the APIs that exist in the world, and there are three buckets. You can put all APIs in one of the three buckets. The first one is the software APIs. The second one is the hardware APIs, sometimes called SCPI as well, SCPI. And the third one is web services API. So the software APIs are APIs or a bridge between one software and another software installed on your machine. For example, I will show you some great examples as well. For example, if you are working on Windows and you want to create a link between your application and Windows, you can use any of the Windows APIs. The examples we just saw, which are very popular, are web services API, Twitter, anything on web. If you're connecting on anything on web, whether it's Google, whether it's Yahoo, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Facebook, all provide APIs, and I will show you some great examples of documentation as well. But they all fall into web services API. So if you're dealing with any web service, you are exchanging any data, you are sending any commands, you are receiving any inputs, you are working with web services API. So let's take some example of the software API. So APIs that provide access to the function or services provided by the software or OS. Now, a lot of people think that operating system is different and the software is different, but in essence, operating system is also a software. So another software is talking to software. So I will give example of SHExit Windows X, which is the most widely used API in Windows. It's enclosed in a shell32 library, which is doing these tasks. So the syntax of this API is SHExit Windows X n, where n can take five values 0, 1, 2, 4, and 8, depending on what you want to do. If you want to shut down your PC, you say SHExit Windows X1, it will shut down the PC. If you want to restart your PC, you say SHExit Windows X2, and it will restart the PC. So Windows provides this API available to anybody. So you can a lot of us have the sleep button on the Windows, and you can program your computer to sleep down after some time. So that program, in essence, use yep in Windows. So if you just Google for Windows APIs, you get a manual, and there are like thousands of open APIs in Windows where you can do anything you want to do in Windows. Uh, in YouTube, if you search for API examples, a lot of people have done fantastic work. And I remember seeing one programmer who have coded a program using Windows API that uh, opens and closes the Windows C tray, which is linked to his baby stroller. So, so the program is like making the baby happy by pulling the stroller. So you can do a lot of stuff with Windows. if you know the APIs, and they are all open APIs, so you can use them very well. There are a lot of examples available, and you can definitely code them in your own applications. So the next category is hardware APIs. Very few technical writers work on the hardware APIs because A, they are not very common. Secondly, sometimes they are not open, and thirdly, they are tricky. You can blow up a machine if the settings are not right. So they are commonly known as SCPIs, SCPI, which stands for Standard Commands for Programmable Instrument. So there are a lot of instruments in which we install software, which we call firmware, and you can use them. Your mobile phone is a Skippy based instrument because you program them. So the operating system on your mobile phone is called a firmware. So you can technically connect your mobile with the laptop, and you can play with the any setting of the mobile phone if you know the APIs. But a lot of time companies like Apple or Google, they do not make their Apple, also Google, maybe even Nokia, they don't make their APIs public, so you cannot do much. A common example is IDN, which specifies the identity of the instrument. So these are some of the instruments. Actually, this is my personal work. Uh, in my last job in India, I was working on the documentation of some of these instruments. So most of these are scientific instruments. They have a firmware, which is typically Windows XP or maybe Windows 2007 now. It has a lot of hardware interface, and you can connect them with a computer as well. And as you can see, if you look at the lower the on the middle of the screen, on the lower portion, there's a big instrument which has a kind of curve. So that instrument and other instruments are used in testing of electronics, and they test electronics very well. And the use case for this kind of instruments is that there's a small production belt in which there are like 7 or 800 components, so 1,000 components being produced every minute, and you have to distinguish whether which components are right or which components are bad. For example, a semi transistor costs just $1, but if you insert that faulty transistor into $100 mobile phone chip, the whole chip goes bad. So you have to test everything in electronics. And imagine there's a small belt, but very small belt, about 1 feet in length, in which you are producing 1,000 capacitors every minute. A robotic arm picks each of the component, and other end of the robotic arm is connected with these kinds of instrument. So the instrument checks whether the capacitor is good or bad. If it's good, it puts into the good bucket. If it's bad, it puts into the bad bucket. So all you see is like a concentration in which the hand is moving left and right, selecting good and bad instrument. You cannot use these instruments by hand. You cannot press the button 1,000 times in a minute. So what you do, you interact with these machines using APIs. You create a computer program that selects the good inputs, that selects the bad inputs. It creates a log inventory, all using Skippies. Skippies are very similar to what we have APIs. Just like we connect to a web service using API, we connect to a instrument using Skippy. And last but not the least, we have the web services API, which provides access to a web service. So this is a chart from a website called Programmable Web, which is a very interesting site. It's like a Google of APIs. So this site contains over 12,000 APIs, documented APIs, which defines the documentation. So a lot of people, a lot of time people ask me where I can find good and bad examples of documentation. Programmableweb.com is a good place. Not all the 12,000 would be good, and not all of the 1,000 API would be bad. So there would be a mixture. Commonly, what I've seen is that big companies, Google, Yahoo, the APIs are really good documented. The lower spectrum is the open source projects, which are volunteer based. Sometimes the documentation is not as good, and you feel it needs to have a lot of API documentation. So this and this is a good example of how fast the world of API is becoming. In 2000, eBay launched their own APIs, which was a revolution. You can connect to eBay. You can sell eBay products on your blog. And if you're seeing different websites in which it says, "Oh, buy this from eBay," and you click the button, it is connected to eBay using an API. That was the earliest example of a web service API. Then it started, and the revolution started in 2005. And in in with having just 105 public APIs in 2005, it became 2,647 APIs in 2010, and now I guess it's more than 12,000 to 15,000, and it's growing at a tremendous rate. Imagine all services, everything you can do with a website. By providing an account, you can create an application, you can create a mobile device, you can create a mobile app which works with the software, and it works on your phone. For example, I'm not sure if it started in India, but in Canada, you don't need to log into your bank account. You have an app on your phone. You can enter your password and you can check your balance on the phone. You don't need to go to bank to deposit a check. You can open the app. You can take a picture of your check and it gets deposited in your account. So it helps a lot. Other if the APIs are not open, then it's not possible to do that. Of course, the those apps, especially the banking domain apps, those are created by the banks because they don't want to open their APIs. They don't want to rob you of any of the accounts, so they are closely guarded secret. But yes, the principles are exactly same. Um, you can use that. You can use different APIs, and a lot of APIs are open now. And if you look at programmableweb.com, there are tons of APIs available. Talking about now APIs, we have seen APIs, what our API does. Let's talk about the structure of an API documentation. Unfortunately, there is no standard structure. The revolution of API started a few years back and everybody went haywire. And it's very similar to documentation. Can you define standard for documentation? uh, in different industries they have their industry specific discrimination, but if you say give me a standard structure of all the manuals in the world, you cannot do that. Every industry, every country, they have their own specific standards. API doesn't have a specific standard, but since we work mostly with Windows, and Windows is the pioneer in most of the technologies, I would say. They recommend. They had. There was a very interesting article in MSDN, which I have a link in my presentation, which specifies the structure for an API documentation. It says that uh, the documentation should have at least these four sections. The first one is the overview, in which you define what is the advantage of the developers. Remember, the intended audience of an API is a developer. So you're writing a developer documentation. So just like an any audience analysis, you have to define the advantages of what the platform does, how to access them, what's the architecture, how you can make authentication. You should provide a getting started guide, which helps a developer to get started in terms of tutorials for simple walkthroughs. For example, I showed a simple tutorial for Google Maps. So you can take the same example and start that. You can provide definitely help. It's very helpful to provide sample code because it gives you a perspective of what an API can do. And nowadays, a lot of now most of the now I've showed you some very basic example, but in the real world, a same API can be used in 8 or 10 different languages. Okay, so I got a message from Padmaja that my voice is breaking. So there's nothing changed in my voice. The connection seems to be fine. So can I just get a yes or no from everybody if they can hear me? Okay, good. Maybe it's the midnight ghost because the clock just turned at midnight in Toronto. So maybe it's the midnight ghost playing with us. So I will continue again. So you provide the sample code. You provide the code samples in which you describe what the API does, what the functions are, what the parameters are. Parameters could be optional. Parameters could be uh, defined. They could be in a range, for example, 1, 2, 3, or whatever. You have to provide well commented. Half the work is done if you provide well commented code samples because people can understand the code. The audience is, of course, development. So the developers need some kind of an invitation to walk into your API world and use that. So they love having well commented code samples, and of course, you can add a lot of reference material. You can define each class. You can define members of the class. You can define different functions. You can define different elements in the API. So, for example, when you are working with web APIs, they return values in either XML or JSON format. So providing a comment of a service call as well as a return code in JSON and XML provides a wealth of information to developers. The good thing and the bad thing is that there are a lot of tools available to take away your job. I'm just kidding. Tools never take away your job. They always help you in getting more things done in little bit of time. So some of the things are so there are some of the tools which are commonly used to document APIs. You can so here's the deal. If you have a very good development team and if they are documenting their own work in the API, you can create an API manual of 10,000 commands spanning 10,000, maybe 15,000 pages in less than an hour using a tool. The syntax should be right, and so these tools, what they do, they parse the code. They trying to understand the syntax call, the API call, what are the parameters, and they generate a dummy documentation within few minutes. And sometimes the documentation is as good as human written documentation. The error of chances, the chances of getting errors in documentation is very less because it maps with the uh, code level. And it's very interesting and useful in agile teams because in agile you have daily builds and you have to generate daily documentation. So instead of technically writing all the generation of documentation using RoboHelp or Flare or FrameMaker, you can use an automatic tool and you can create a runbook job which uses this tool to generate automatic documentation. So I've listed couple of popular documentation methods, but there are many, many more. And the interesting part is that most of them are open source and free to use. Some are paid, but they are well worth the small cost they have. Uh, so, Padma requested me to show some good and bad examples. So, what I've done is that I've opened the few examples. So let's start with the example we saw about Google Maps. So Google is an interesting place. So the URL is developers.google.com/maps. So it shows you all the APIs related to Google Maps. And if you look at the content, it shows you APIs for images. It shows you APIs for places, for Google Earth, for web services, for and a lot of talk about licensing, the limits. And let's talk about the Maps API. So these are the static maps in which you can embed an image in your own web page without using any API, which is very interesting. Uh, if you look at the Places API, so it's a very comprehensive example. So it has a developer guide and a reference guide. And if you look at the reference guide, there's ton of materials. It talks about the introduction of what the APIs are, what the type of requests are available, and talk about the authentication, which is the key most ingredient in a documentation if you cannot authenticate the connection. So authentication is like creating a bridge. You can travel on a bridge after it's been created. So authentication is the bridge you connect between one application to another application, and then you start working on that bridge. So authentication is probably the most important section of the uh, code you would be writing. If the authentication code is not correct, if people cannot authenticate the connection, they cannot use your API. Period. And uh, Google, Twitter, and lot of other. This is a very important note to all of you that most of lot of developers, a lot of technical writers, they are not very comfortable in downloading developer tools or IDEs. So what they can do if they want to play with web APIs, they can visit the website, and most of the websites, for example, Google and Twitter, and I think even YouTube, they provide what they call is a console. So you can enter the console, you can log in, and you can play with the APIs without requiring any additional software. So you create a sample, you execute the sample. You can do this in Twitter, you can do this in Google. So they're very interesting things to do. So let's take a look at Twitter APIs. So Twitter APIs is very good. It talks about the OAuth, which is the authentication for Twitter, how it authenticates, its different methods of authentication. It talks about the APIs. So these are the different APIs you can use in Twitter. There are a lot of objects. There are a lot of things you can do with tweets. For example, if you want to get a tweet from a friend, you can create an API and use the same tweet. So it contains a lot of good documentation if you are trying. For example, uh, you can embed documentation in some kind of tweet. Like I blog on WordPress, and when I blog on WordPress, I check a status which posts my WordPress article as a tweet. So the WordPress is actually talking to Twitter using one of the APIs of tweeting. It asks for my authentication in when you create the account, and once authentication is done, all it does is just shoot out the tweets on my behalf. Similarly, you have the Google APIs, you have YouTube APIs. So YouTube has a very good and sophisticated documentation available for your view, which talks about the APIs and different ways to connect the APIs. For example, if you are a Java programmer and you want to connect to YouTube, you can see the Java section or JavaScript or .NET or PHP or Python or Ruby or Python or app. So these are different programming applications. They are different programming languages which you can use to connect to the YouTube API. So the API is exactly the same, but you can use any of the applications languages to develop an application and call the API. So it enhances your reach of audience. I would definitely encourage you to view these samples, which are very good, and also the programmable web, which is a good resource to view good and bad documentation. So this is the website I was discovering. So when I started creating the presentation and I wanted to give you a resource, so this is pretty good resource. It contains over 12,000 APIs, which is a big task. No other website on web does that. It has a direct listing of probably all the open APIs. So if you work with an application and it has an open API, there's a very good chance that this website has the links and the links to documentation. So feel free to visit this website and decide few documentation of the major players: Yahoo, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and compare it with the documentation of open source applications which are hardly used. So the documentation is lacking on most of the open source documentation. I am an enthusiastic upon open source. I love open source. The only thing that lacks sometimes is documentation. So a lot of people ask me that what they can do to create their own portfolios, especially when they are trying to be in the field. I definitely recommend them to get in touch with some open source software which requires documentation, and definitely create their own portfolio and help the community. So I've added links to the article which I suggested in the beginning of my session, which is a MSDN article from Microsoft, which talks about API documentation and one good way of doing it. The programmer web is another resource, which is a directory of all the open listed APIs, and this was it. I understand and that it's difficult to get in the morning, especially for a boring session like this. But I hope you have enjoyed my presentation, and I would love to answer any questions if you have. You can post your question in the chat box. We still have few minutes. We can definitely do a Q&A session. So I'm sorry, somehow, Harry, have you have asked some questions, so I can definitely get some feedback on that. I haven't had much experience with Bitbucket and GitHub, but for sure you can use that as well. There are many resources. Programmable is one of the major directories. Sure, Mukti, if you go to Google website or just type Google APIs or Google Maps API, you can see all the documentation of the APIs. So rather the shell shock, I would not say good or bad API documentation. If it serves the purpose, then it's good. So it really depends upon what you're trying to achieve with the API. The basic syntax is should be done. So I think it's a decent documentation. And I blog on technicwritingtoolbox.com, and if somebody wants to contact me through email, my email is, I will just type it down. So this is my email, Gurpreet writes at yahoo.ca. You can also connect with me using my blog and ask any questions. I may not have all the answers, but I can definitely point you to the right group. And if you look on LinkedIn, there are a lot of good API documentation groups. Even I think somebody started an API group. There's a existing API Yahoo group by Rajiv Jain. So that's an interesting group in which there are a lot of technical writers. I'm moderator of a group on LinkedIn for documentation of APIs. So we have a very lively group which has over 1,500 members, API documentation writers from all over the world, and they keep on posting some really good and interesting material about APIs. So Harry asked a question about what tools can we use to design an API documentation. So Harry, the answer is anything. You can, in simplistic term, you can use RoboHelp or Madcap to publish an API document. In fact, the I have in the past I have used RoboHelp to publish APIs which were more than 6,000 or 10,000 APIs in one go, and they were robust enough. I have gone up to 20,000 API documentation using RoboHelp, and it was fine. Or you can use Wiki, or you can use any tool. So API is so most of the example you see is based on Wiki because it's easier to manage and publish. So Mukti asked a very interesting question. If internet is not working, can we use API through browser? Of course you can. If the API is for accessing the software on your PC, internet is only required if you are accessing a web-based API. But if you have something which is installed on your PC or on the internal network, you do not need to have an internet connection. Raga asked a question that if we take an API and use it on our system, is there's a possibility of spyware and things being installed on our system? I would say the answer is uh, maybe, maybe not. Most of the safest bet is to work with publicly defined APIs. For example, I don't think Yahoo or Google or Facebook or Twitter would allow their APIs to install anything on your PC. So the safe bet to start with those and play with those. And once you get more comfortable, you will understand what is a good API and a bad API. SAP has a good API documentation for sure. I have used Confluence in the past for developing a lot of documentation, so it's a nice product, especially if your team is global. You can use it to publish huge amount of documentation instantly. Okay, so just want to get your feedback from everybody that before the session and after the session, did your understanding change about APIs? Would you like to work on API documentation, or is it or you still feel that the API is a complicated thing to do? So very good documentation is defined if the user can work with APIs very easily. I tried to work in the past when I started working on APIs. So some of the open source products, it's very difficult to make a connection, especially the authentication part. So that throws you off. But if you can make a connection, if you can use the APIs, and it's a good example, then it's a good documentation. So Mukti, the scope of so Mukti asks a question that what is the scope of API documentation? So Mukti, if you are working on a product that has an API and you need to document it, uh, there's a good scope of API documentation. And if you're working with any of the web services companies, Facebook, Google, for example, you need to have an API documentation background. It helps a lot, and I'm sure like not everybody, and you don't need to learn programming. Of course it helps, but you need to have a basic understanding of code, so that separates you as rest of the technical writers. So Raga, the API you saw the asset exist is start for shell 32 library. So you can create a small program in Visual Basic. For example, Visual, a lot of people don't know, but all the Office products, Microsoft Window Office, Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, they have an inbuilt engine called VBA, Visual Basic for Applications. You can write small scripts and use any of the Windows API from there. Padmaja, I'm just curious how many people were in the session. I couldn't see the attendees tab, so I have no idea how many people were in the session today. Okay, so thanks everybody, and it's about time to close, and it's a nice, lovely evening in Toronto. Not evening, it's a little bit morning. So the time is 12:30 right now in the morning in Toronto. So it was a great session talking to you all. And if you like the session, I would love to have some feedback. You can write me on my email ID at gurpreetsites@yahoo.ca, or post a session on post a question or a query or a comment about on my blog. I would love to have this, and if you are interested in having more sessions, please contact STC India, and I would love to create some more examples and some more relevant sessions for you guys. So it's been great talking to you all, and thanks a lot for attending the session.